So we are going to talk about the midpoint and distance formula today. Now these two things you actually were introduced to them last year in your Algebra 1 class if you were at Frommel Station. So here is the midpoint formula. You have, basically you're finding the midpoint between 2 points, and so your midpoint of your line segment. And so you're going to basically take the average of the x coordinates and the average of the y coordinates, and that'll give you your midpoint coordinates here, okay? And why it works is the x coordinate comes from the average of the two x values from the endpoints. That is the halfway point. If you think about the x axis, that's the horizontal axis. So it's the halfway point horizontally. The y coordinate comes from the average of the y values from the two endpoints, and that's the halfway point vertically because that's our y. Our y axis is a vertical axis there. So on the you try it, find the midpoint between -2, 5 and 2, 1. So you can see here that I plotted these 2 points here. We have B, we'll say A and B there, okay? And then if I want to find the midpoint between those two, I would take the average of my x values and then my average of my y values, and then I would get 0, 3. Okay, and here we have our distance formula. And if you remember, our distance formula comes from the Pythagorean theorem, a squared plus b squared equals c squared. And the Pythagorean theorem applies because a right triangle can always be constructed with the length of the hypotenuse equal to the distance between 2 points. So here's what that looks like here. We have our 2 points, B and C, and the length segment, BC, I can construct a right triangle with this line segment that I want to find the distance of. That is my hypotenuse. So it's based off of the Pythagorean theorem, and the distance formula is here. So we have distance equals the square root of y2 minus y1 squared plus x2 minus x1 squared. And these are interchangeable, so you can put your x2 minus x1 here or your y2 minus y1 here. It doesn't really matter because of the commutative property of addition. You can also switch your 2's and 1's as long as you keep it consistent. The subscripts just represent the first and the second x and y values, and as long as you choose and keep it consistent with what is your first and what is your second, it doesn't really matter what you choose when you're doing the distance formula. Okay, so on our try it here, we have find the distance between B and C, and they want us to use the distance formula up here, and they also want us to use the Pythagorean theorem. So in blue, I have the distance formula. So I have my 2 points, B is at 0, 1, C is at 4, 3. I simply plug that into my distance formula, and I did use the y's first, but again, you can do the x's first. It really doesn't matter. So, and then I made this the first point that I used. So 3 minus 1 squared plus 4 minus 0 squared. 3 minus 1 is 2, 4 minus 0 is 4. 2 squared is 4, 4 squared is 16, and then I added the 2 to get 20. Of course, last year we learned how to simplify radicals, and you will be responsible for putting your answer in simplest form here. So square root of 20 would simplify to 2 square root 5. The Pythagorean theorem way, I would just use A, B, and C for my drawing. So my distance of A is 4 units, my distance of side B is 2 units, and then I'm looking for my hypotenuse here. So 4 squared is 16, 2 squared is 4, and that equals C squared. If I want to, and then I add them, and if I want to solve for C squared, I take the inverse of that, which is the square root, and then again I simplify to 2 square root 5. So it is important that you remember how to simplify radicals, and if you do not remember how to do that, you really do need to look that up and relearn that information again from Algebra 1. So what you need to do is after you've filled in all your notes, and if you might have had to hit pause here and there to make sure everything's filled in, you need to now find the midpoint and length of a segment with endpoints 2, -4, and -3, 1. Do your work on the back side of this worksheet, and then the answer can go right here, and that will make sure that you actually watch this video and that it was a good refresher for you for a midpoint and distance formula. Again, only refresher if you were here last year at Farmwell.